Let's make no mistake about it, Mr. Speaker. This is an omnibus bill. And I can't tell you how many times Liberals spoke about omnibus bills. You know, we often hear about the ghost of Stephen Harper in these places, but they frequently railed against the Harper government and omnibus bills. And here we have the government tabling an omnibus bill, but it's not quite omnibus enough to include key areas. Let's look at the bill. 130 pages, Mr. Speaker. I'm just looking at it right now. I don't see here anything about bail. Pretty big issue in the news just today. It's pretty much in the news every single day. Nothing about bail. My colleague just said, do you want bail in it? Heck, yes, I want bail in it. We really want to deal with bail. We as Conservatives want to deal with bail. In fact, I had 2 private members' bills, Mr. Speaker, that dealt with bail last time. One of them was in response to the killing of Constable Pirjala, a police officer. I believe he was in his late 20s, mid-20s. And he was killed. I believe I could say was killed. The person is no longer accused. They went to trial by somebody on bail. His first shift alone, just past his probation period. That person was also had a firearms prohibition. Those prohibitions are now being treated like they're not worth the paper they're written on. So I invite my colleague from Winnipeg, who heckled me and said, do you want bail in it? Yes, we want bail in it. I will gladly take him up. I will gladly meet with the Minister of Public Safety. In fact, in questions and comments, I want him to stand up, Mr. Speaker. It actually doesn't take much to cajole him to stand up, even if there are 30 people behind him. The Liberals are laughing because they know it's true. And tell me, will they pass Bill C-313 from the last Parliament that made the hill much harder to climb for people who were previously convicted of gun charges and on firearms prohibitions? This is a small, discrete group of people. So in his prelude, Mr. Speaker, I challenge him to say, yes, we will support Bill C-313 or my other private member's bill on bail that targeted a very small but discrete group of people who were accused of 3 indictable offenses at one time, as in those files had not been resolved, with 10 years or more. Those offenses are like robbery, manslaughter, assault with a weapon, assault causing bodily harm by indictment. Again, I invite that member. He's been here for a long time. He speaks on behalf of the government. Does he have the guts to stand up and say, we will incorporate the principles of those bills in here? I would love to work with the government to address bail. What about fentanyl sentencing, Mr. Speaker? I wonder if the member from Winnipeg is on side with his party's views on sentencing. You know, it's like we're getting this tough on crime stuff from the Liberals. And you know what we heard? In fact, it was this member, too. Now that I come to think of it, it was a member from Winnipeg. I introduced a bill about sexual offenses. And the whole point of the bill on sexual offenses was to raise the sentence on sexual offenses. Because a lot of people don't know this. But sexual offenses are actually treated less seriously than property offenses in some regards. For instance, if you break into somebody's house, the maximum sentence is life imprisonment. If you rob somebody, those who don't know, robbery is theft with an element of violence. You go to jail for life. But if you take somebody's dignity and consent, a crime of violence, just like robbery, the maximum sentence is 10 years. So I was bringing this up, and who did I get heckled by? Tough on crime, he said. The member from Winnipeg. So they will tell us how tough they are on crime now, when they mocked us last time, and not only will they tell us how tough they are on crime, they will do little about it. So, this omnibus bill, fentanyl sentencing. You can serve your sentence for trafficking in fentanyl from your couch. I challenge any Liberal. There's going to be 10 minutes for questions and comments. I challenge any Liberal who rises to say to me, through you, Mr. Speaker, I agree with that. I agree that people who traffic in one of the deadliest drugs, if not the deadliest drug, that we know of, who are literally peddling poison, and I'm speaking right to the Liberals here, those who are prepared to look me in the eye when I say this, that it is okay that they sit at home playing their video game system, listening to their favorite music, sleeping in their bed, when they are literally peddling poison. House arrest. Let's go another one, Mr. Speaker. Firearms offenses. And these actually, one of the offenses in a case called Regina and Oud out of British Columbia was upheld by the BC Court of Appeal as being a constitutional mandatory minimum. Discharge with intent. Discharge with intent. That's a drive-by shooting, those types of things. The Liberals legislated that you could serve that sentence at home. Previously, it was a 4-year mandatory minimum. They kept the 5-year minimum if it was a handgun or a restricted firearm. But oftentimes the guns aren't ever recovered. Nobody says, I just did a drive-by, police, here's the gun. This doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And the Liberals are telling us they are tough on crime. And they say, look at our Border Act. 130 pages. Look at this. We're so tough on crime. I challenge any member of the Liberals who will stand up, I challenge them again to say, through you, Speaker, I am okay with people who do drive-by shootings with serving their sentence at home. Okay? People will say, well, you're just tough on crime indiscriminately. Like, to the contrary. I think most people deserve a second chance. In fact, a lot of people do. Some people deserve a second chance because they've done something stupid. They've made decisions. They got into an addiction. A lot of people I saw, they were in a car accident and they were prescribed opiates. And next thing you know, they have an opiates addiction. We're not talking about locking the door and throwing away the key for the majority of offenders. What we're talking about is a small, discrete group of offenders. Nowhere in this bill does it talk about those things. So we are prepared to talk about everything but. We're prepared to talk about internet service providers and whether they have to turn over their materials without a warrant. And that's a response to a recent Supreme Court of Canada decision. For those who don't know, an ISP address is easily discoverable, but as I recall, I haven't read the case in some time or looked at the case in some time, but the police said, or the court said, you need a warrant. There's an expectation of privacy there. I could just go on and on and on about what isn't in this bill. But again, I challenge my Liberal colleagues. Will they have the guts to stand up and say, I am okay with those things? Because if they don't, if they're not okay with those things, then why aren't they petitioning this government to amend the bill, to be tough on the crime that they say they are tough on? Mr. Speaker, this bill has a number of elements to it. I think it's 15 parts. Obviously, the first part we're dealing with looks at CBSA, Canada Border Services and Canada Border Services Agency, and their ability to do searches. It was interesting because when the leader of the opposition in the last Parliament would say people were literally tracking their cars to our ports, seeing them go into containers, and they were told you can't trespass on that port. Well, I want to get my car back. Can't do it. We got laughed at as conservatives for this, for our supposed tough on crime. And here the Liberals are saying, oh, you conservatives need to pass this omnibus bill. We have a lot of questions about this bill. And I think that Canadians deserve to have these questions answered, Mr. Speaker. The Canada Post Corporation Act will be amended in Part 4 to permit the demand, seizure, detention, or retention of anything in the course of the post only in accordance with the Act of Parliament. So as I understand that, Mr. Speaker, now Madam Speaker, welcome to the chair. As I understand that, there is a judicial authorization, commonly known as a warrant. Typically, it's a warrant that's embedded there. But this is really interesting, and I would love for the government to expand on this, because this is something I know I'm going to get mail about, if I haven't gotten it already. And Part 4 allows Canada Post Corporation to open mail in certain circumstances. Now, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert in this regard, Madam Speaker, but the nature of mail has been regarded as private since Confederation, really. People haven't, in other words, Canada Post has not been able to open somebody's mail. The reason now, if we're talking about language in the Charter, it's referred to as an expectation of privacy. The highest expectation is on your body, then you've got things like your phones, letters, but there's still an expectation of privacy there. So I'd really like to have the government explain what that threshold would be, and why is it that Canada Post would be doing this? Those are just questions that I think we really need to have answered. Similarly, the Coast Guard provisions. How's that going to look in practice? This is a really significant bill, Mr. Speaker, that I think we need a bit more information. I'm mindful of the fact that sometimes we always will have rights of the individual, and I noticed that a lot of my Liberal colleagues stood up and clapped when they spoke about the party of the Charter and Charter rights. As my colleague from Calgary, Nose Hill, noted, there is no Charter statement here. So the government was able to give us a 130-page bill with 15 parts, and when we say, where's the Charter statement, there's a bit of a shoulder shrug, the proverbial shoulder shrug with, it just came out 2 days ago. Well, if you can put out a 130-page bill, certainly you can put out a 4 or 5-page Charter statement. To me, it would amaze me, Madam Speaker, if nobody in the government went through this document and said, is it Charter compliant? Certainly somebody did. So the government that says, we are all about the Charter, we believe in this, won't tell Canadians what their experts have said about whether this legislation is Charter compliant. As a critic, how am I to respond to people who have very good faith inquiries about this type of legislation? The next part, Madam Speaker, it gets into citizenship and immigration. I'm not going to touch on that because I know that my colleague from Calgary, Nose Hill, will be dealing with that. I know I've got probably a few minutes left in my speech, 1 minute left in my speech. The last thing I want to do is reflect on the life of a good friend. His name was Mark Evard, and he wasn't Canadian, but he touched the lives of many Canadians. Mark passed away unexpectedly of a heart attack just before the election. I cannot understate the profound influence that this man had on my life. He leaves behind children, Stephen, Lauren, and Patrick. Got to spend time with Mark and Patrick right around the pandemic just before. Mark touched so many lives, and I wanted to recognize him here through his work in youth ministry, for the church, and as a servant. May perpetual light shine upon him, and it was my honor to know him. With that, I will conclude my speech and take questions, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Questions and comments. L'honorable député de Bourassa.
The honourable member for Bourassa. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member from the opposition for his speech and for the challenge that he's given us regarding this issue. I listened closely to his speech, and we certainly agree on a number of elements. And, you know, we agree because we want a perception of security for all Canadians. But that having been said, we certainly cannot mislead Canadians, because here, obviously, we're talking about a bill that will be discussed, that will be debated, that has a number of elements in it where I hope that the members across the way, when we come forward with a working document, we hope we'll have their collaboration in discussion. That having been said, in his intervention, Madam Speaker, I think he was talking about some things that weren't in the bill and that should be added, but he forgot to talk about what's in the bill. And what we're trying to do, and what I don't fully understand, is the direction that the opposition is taking, because we're trying to give our police services with the tools that they need so that they can do their work well. We know that these criminal groups want to accelerate how they do things and accelerate their use of technology, particularly in cybercrime. We want to give police the tools they need. And if we want to fight crime, we see on the other side of the House, they're not following. In his intervention as well, the member talked about the work of police officers, but what I see as being absent from the opposition position is talking about... I have to interrupt the honourable member because the question is going well beyond the normal time for questions.
Thompson Nicola.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my colleague for his speech, and I welcome him to... Sorry, I didn't mean to say speech. I meant to say question. I really did. But it was a bit of a speech, perhaps an SO31 or two. Madam Speaker, this member may not know, I didn't talk about this because people are tired of hearing about it. I was a prosecutor in my prior life where I mostly focused on prosecuting internet offenses against kids. Okay, so I am very well aware of judicial authorizations and the hurdles that those types of things can present, and that this bill is a direct response to some of the decisions. So I am very clear on that. Now, my colleague did mention, he was rising to the challenge, but we didn't actually hear him say, does he support house arrest for fentanyl traffickers? Does he support house arrest for people who do drive-by shootings? In fact, I would invite him to get up again in a very brief question and comment period and say, through the chair, yes, I support this, and that's that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Beauharnois, Salaberry, Soulange, Huntingdon. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague, and I'll have the honour of sitting with him on the Public Safety Committee, and let's hope that it will be convened soon. He spoke quite a bit about privacy rights and protection of that. I agree with him that that has to be looked at. We'll be looking at that in committee because there's a very thin line between protecting privacy and protecting private information and confidential information. And I'd like to maybe lead him in another direction. In the bill, there are additional powers that are given to Border Services agents to inspect, for example, train cars in sorting yards, because Madam Speaker, trains are inspected for imports but not for exports right now. Does he agree with this aspect of the bill, that rail cars should be inspected by Border Services agents? And is he at the same time not concerned that there's already a lack of enough agents to meet the demand? So how does he think the government is going to be able to add these powers without having enough agents?
For Kamloops, Thompson Nicola.
Well, I thank my colleague for her intervention. It will be an honour as well to sit with her around the committee table as the public safety critic. We haven't had a chance to work together before, but I do look forward to working with her and perhaps practicing my French. Her intervention, her question was what I would call a fairly loaded one, because it had elements of generalities, as in we don't have enough agents to do this, but also the specificity of the rail cars. What I can say right now is that she's right. We don't have the agents to do this. The minister actually spoke about how we're going to have, I think it's $300 million was referred to earlier, but we're going to start having scanners and things like that. Why aren't they there already? This is just a colossal failure by the government to not have it there. And she's right. There is a labor shortage in this regard. And this actually highlights one of the biggest issues that I have with much of the government's interventions. It's always, we're gonna. But it's never, we're gonna do this and this is how we're gonna get there. This government can't build homes. This government can't even plant trees. How is this government going to secure the border?
Joseph, got questions and comments. The honourable member for Southwick Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my friend and colleague from Kamloops, Thompson, Nicola, for his great intervention and the expertise that he brings to this chamber on the issues of public safety and criminal justice. One of the reasons I got involved in politics back in 2003 and got elected in 2004 was because I opposed the Liberals' long gun registry. And here, what we've seen through the past 10 years is the Liberals continue to vilify law-abiding long gun owners, licensed firearms owners, and give the pass to the criminals that are actually committing the crimes. So I want to just ask my colleague, our Shadow Minister for Public Safety, if he sees anything in Bill C-2 that will actually restore the property rights of law-abiding firearms owners and actually take the guns away from the criminals who are committing them on our streets.
Honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Nicola.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my colleague for his intervention. I've learned a lot from him. We first met a number of years ago, and it's been really great just to walk with him in my parliamentary journey. I see nothing in here that deals with firearms. Kamloops, Thompson, Nicola, like so much of Canada, is a rural area. I believe there are 27 First Nations in my riding, and hunting is integral to those First Nations. And we, again, have the Liberals speaking out of both sides of their mouth on this, saying we need to really crack down on guns and illegal guns and the shootings, and yet they're burying us in more bureaucracy without going after people who repeatedly breach firearms, firearms prohibitions and things like that. So I see nothing in that. I actually see now that the member for Winnipeg is able to ask a question. So again, I challenge him to stand up and say whether he is in favor of my bills 313 and on bail, and whether he still supports house arrest for people who do drive-by shootings and traffic fentanyl. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, I think, Madam Speaker, a little bit more relevant to the issue is the question whether or not the Conservative Party actually supports Bill C-2. We have the Canadian Police Association, which represents tens of thousands of law enforcement, frontline law enforcement officers, and we're seeing the Conservatives play this whole cat and mouse, trying to put a little bit of bait here and there. The bottom line is that whether it's President Trump's concerns, Canadian concerns, law enforcement concerns, this bill should go to committee, ideally soon. Does the Conservative Party, the member opposite who represents the Conservative Party, support the legislation, and would they not agree that time is of the essence?
The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Nicola.
He mentioned cat and mouse. That was the most cat and mouse response I've ever seen. I challenged him. He speaks more, I think, than every other Liberal member combined, Madam Speaker. And you would think that he could address the challenge. Does he support house arrest for people who traffic fentanyl? Does he support house arrest for this? I challenged him, Madam Speaker. He wouldn't even answer. He just heckled me, give me an answer. Madam Speaker, we don't even have a charter statement yet. This is a 130-page document, and seeing as the Liberals want to move with such expeditious in such an expeditious manner, they sure took 10 years to get here. So again, talking out of both sides of their mouth in this regard.